So welcome everyone. It's now 2 o'clock. Welcome to this session. I'm Shannon White, the session moderator, and I have just a few housekeeping items before we get started. First, we ask that you keep yourself muted, and we'll save questions until the end, but feel free also to use chat throughout the session to submit questions. We are recording this session and you'll have access to it after the conference as well as the session slides. Lastly, closed captioning is available and you can use your Zoom tools to bring that up. Today's presentation is From Resources to Practice, Convening an Open Pedagogy Learning Community, and our presenters are Regina Gong and Andy Boyles from MSU. Welcome everyone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon session. I hope you are enjoying the second day of the My OER Summit so far. So my name is Regina Gong, and I am the OER and Student Success Librarian at Michigan State. And I am here with my co-facilitator to the Open Pedagogy Learning Community that we have convened last academic year. So that's fall 2020 and spring 2021 semester. Andy Peterson. So I'll start off with that, and Andy will take over talking to you about the foundation of open pedagogy and how we incorporated that into our discussion of what it means to enact this practice. Andy?
Thank you so, Regina. So as Regina was saying, today we'll be talking about the affordances of OER to improve our teaching practices and student engagement. Through the case study of our open pedagogy learning community here at Michigan State University, we'll talk a little bit about how we can create open spaces and open practices. But before we really delve into that and look at our learning community, it's really important for us to truly define and understand open pedagogy, open educational practices, and their relationship with OER. There are a wide range of competing definitions of both open pedagogy as well as open educational practices, which can really make it a little bit difficult to come up with one definite definition to use. As such, we're going to look at a few different ways of defining open pedagogy and open educational practice, seeing how they each interplay and scaffold amongst each other. We are doing this today in part because we began our learning community this last year by following the same process, with all of us coming to open pedagogy from different departments, disciplines, and lived experiences. Scaffolding with different definitions really helped us find commonalities and craft our own ways of looking at how we can apply open pedagogy and open educational practices into our own context. So let's delve in. We start, how is open pedagogy defined? We will look at kind of a few definitions of it, how various folks have defined it. In this definition, Robin DeRosa and Rajiv Jangiani talk about the intersection of learning, technology, and social justice, and how those three really inform the development of our educational practices. In another one, in Open at the Margins, Susan also talks about social justice here, but this one adds intentionality in our approach to teaching. Intentionality, namely meaning that we're pushing our students to explore different perspectives and being very clear in the goals and aims of our practices. Transitioning from open pedagogy to open educational practices, we see open pedagogy as one component. Catherine Cronin describes pairing OER with OEP and having open sharing of teaching practices, both with our students and with our community. Looking at another definition of OEP, this time by the Open Education Quality Initiative, again centers the use of OER as a way to empower our learners. Whereas Cronin's definition particularly was looking at and discussing open and sharing, OPAL brings in a push for growth within the institution, more of a structural approach, as well as the individual classroom. So pairing those two, not just the individual classroom, but also the academy as a whole. The Open e-learning content observatory services definition focuses heavily on our students, as well as their own self-management and self-actualization, that concept of their own kind of coming into being, own finding themselves, finding their practice, finding their way, elaborating on the empowerment and intentionality that we discussed just a few slides ago in our definitions of open pedagogy. Bringing a lot of these concepts together, the UK OER program's expansive definition of OEP encompasses 6 distinct practices. Some key highlights to point out within this one are the addition of open data and other open scholarship, as well as open technologies. So how do we analyze openness? The Center for Innovation in Learning and Teaching's approach serves as a framework for analyzing openness along a continuum using the areas of technical, legal, cultural, pedagogical, and financial. SILT research has emphasized the importance of broadening studies of OER to include OEP with a particular emphasis on wider global perspectives. Building on our discussion of open pedagogy and open educational practices, Wiley and Hilton's definition of OER-enabled pedagogy presents an alternate framework revolving around the 5 Rs for bringing open into the classroom. So we've looked at a lot of definitions here, and through these different definitions, we return to DeRosa and Janjiani's in the Open Pedagogy Notebook with what we can truly hope to achieve through a learning community focused on open pedagogy. These definitions have each brought something unique to the table, asking us all to interrogate our teaching practices, but also our sharing practices, relationships with students in the academy, our course development practices, and more. Ultimately, we hope to leverage the power of OER to rethink, reshape, and reimagine how we teach and value knowledge. This framework, these assorted definitions, kind of culminating in this element from the Open Pedagogy Notebook, is really what drove us through the course of the year in our learning community. This ultimately leads us to envision new possibilities for the future while acknowledging that openness is contextual and messy. This is something that we came back to time and time again in our learning community this year. We fully recognize that past strategies for pedagogy may not be the most suited for building community and actively engaging and supporting students. But with that said, new pedagogical strategies can be very difficult. They can be time consuming. They can be labor intensive. That effort might not be recognized by departments as well. But this was something that we discussed a lot this past year, and how to kind of incorporate these elements into our classrooms and into our pedagogy while recognizing and making space for the challenges and the time associated with that. We must ask ourselves, what are our places or spaces of possibility? How do we construct those spaces and nurture democratic learning environments where people are exposed to different perspectives and really challenge the way that they view the world and their position in it? How can we help our students and one another have the will to learn enthusiastically and passionately, despite all the difficulties that come with deep learning? This really brings us into our open educational practice learning community, and out of the kind of the underpinnings of it and into the actual practice, which Regina will address now.
Thanks a lot, Andy, for laying the groundwork for the definition or the multiple definition of open pedagogy that we had to grapple with in our learning community. So now I'll just give you an overview of how this community came about. So this is actually, the learning community is actually under the auspices of our Academic Advancement Network. So that is under the office of the Provo. Every year, they make out a call for participation or a call for proposals for anyone in the MSU community to propose a learning community, right? So this can be in any subject that would enhance teaching and learning. So our OER initiative was started in fall of 2019. And as we completed the first year of our OER program, I really wanted our first cohort of OER faculty who are creating OER or adopting OER to move from that the resources to the practice component of open, so that they can really see the promise and potential and possibilities that OER can enable in their teaching. So hence, I proposed this learning community, and thankfully it was approved. And we had a small funding, for us to get together. But of course, with the pandemic, our convening all became online. So our initial, and if you can just go to the next slide. So this is the goal of our OER program. And as I mentioned, affordability, access, equity, that is really, one of our primary goals. But more than that is the ability to empower our faculty to engage in new pedagogical models. And what better way to do that than, have that conversation about open educational practices and open pedagogy. So if you go to the next slide, Andy, thanks. So this learning community really brings together educators who are using or planning on using OER and would like to incorporate practices that leverages the affordances of OER. So we specifically wanted our participants to incorporate co-creation with their students. So if they are teaching a course, think about ways in which knowledge is co-created and made possible through the open materials that they are using. So the initial participants of this learning community are our OER award participants or awardees. So there were about 12 of them initially, and we also opened it up by invitation, because this is our first year, to other folks out there who might want to join us and further their learning. I'm so glad that in this room, and I'm gonna give a shout out to our participants because I am gonna call on you later. So we have two of our faculty who are OER creators, Denise Acevedo, Rajiv Ranjan, we have Bonnie Russell, and also Dave Goodrich. So I will call on you later to kind of like share your thoughts, okay, if that's okay. So the next slide, please, Andy. Yay. So really what we wanted to achieve with this learning community is for us to have that support, right? Because it seems, if you are the only one doing OER in your department, it seems like an isolating experience, right? So we wanted to have that community where we all learn from each other. We all, and I, as the OER lead at MSU, certainly would like to learn how our faculty are incorporating not just the resources part, but also the practices part. So this is really what it is about. It's a learning community and a supportive community. So next slide, please. So this is our community norms. Oh, and Andy and I designed the curriculum. I asked Andy to help me co-facilitate this. He's working a lot on DH and digital scholarship and all those ways in which we can find intersectionality, right? Between what I do in OER and what he does in the digital scholarship, digital humanities field. So our community norms, simple. You know, we have to be respectful, be honest. There will be difficult conversations in this community, and we want it to be a safe space where we can all be open, learning with each other, learning with and along each other. And really, that safe place is really very important for us, because we want to be able to demonstrate that not just the openness part, but also the honesty part, right? There would be conversations here that you might not be, you know, yeah, it's difficult, right? Because it takes you to the heart of the challenges that you are experiencing in the classroom, and also challenges that you're experiencing teaching, right? In this university. So the safe place is really very important for us in this community. And the next slide, please. So, and these guiding questions animate each of our interactions. So we meet once a month for 1.5 hours, usually the third Friday of each month. And you know, these guiding questions here are the questions that we always have in our minds, foregrounding our work, foregrounding our discussion, because really this one we all need to kind of like take a look at, even if we are not teachers in the classroom, because we are students too, right? At some point in our life, and we have hopes for education, particularly higher education. So yeah, so that is like our guiding questions. And the next slide, please, Andy. This is what we, in terms of tools, right? In terms of tools that we use in the learning community, we have two, among other things, right? So MSU Commons is our institutional repository, and Bonnie Russell, one of our participants in that community, is here in this room. It's an open access platform for connecting with other scholars to share their work and develop their online presence. So we have a particular page in the OER Commons, which we created. It's called Open Pedagogy Learning Community. That is where we put in all our meeting notes or the materials that we use. That is where we share materials that we, create or we have as part of our curriculum. And you can also use that as a means to communicate with each other. So it's a closed community. It only is populated by the members of the Open Pedagogy group. And then we also use Hypothesis, which, Hypothesis, there should be a period there between the S and the I. Anyway, yeah, that's just how they market it. But anyways, Hypothesis is an online annotation tool that we use to annotate some of the websites that we are looking at as part of our exercise. So our monthly readings are linked in our Hypothesis group. So we also have a Hypothesis group, and we will show you how it looks like later. And it allows for us to annotate, highlight, and comment on text that we are using as part of our curriculum. And then next part. So this is how the MSU Commons Open Pedagogy group looks like. So, so the members here are the members of the LC, and it's basically a repository where you can deposit all the materials that you have for a particular learning community or group. And then the next slide is just a sample of what we've done during our first, I think it was like our second meeting, right, Andy? So we had a group activity. So, we have assignments for our participants to do, right? So because we only meet once a month, we kind of want to have that continuity between your meetings and the next meeting. And so we have them do some assignments, so that that is part of what we are going to do in the next meeting. So for this one, we asked them to annotate the page called, so that is the Year of Open. I think that is from the Open Education group, or Open Education Consortium. So they had a feature article there, or blog post, series of blog posts that ask some of our open educators like Mahabali, Rajiv Jangani, and other folks, what is open pedagogy, right? And so we have that page, and we ask our participants to annotate that page and tell us what about those views by these open educators resonate most with them. So so that was the first assignment, and I don't know if it's in the next slide, Andy. Yes. So that is the page. So that is Year of Open. And as you can see on the right side of the screen here is the Open Pedagogy Learning Community. So we created that account in Hypothesis, and each of our participants are free to annotate, the page and make comments as to what about their views of open pedagogy resonates with them, or they can relate to. So that one. And then we also use a lot of examples from the Open Pedagogy Notebook, which was started by Robin De Rosa and Rajiv Jangani. I'm sure a lot of you probably know about this site. This is a collection of examples, case studies, which are classroom tested, and some budding ideas or practices that you can incorporate as you are getting your feet wet in the area of open pedagogy. So we use a lot of that. And the next slide, please, Andy. So we also use some of the case studies here. So the course that we designed was intended for our participants to have that combination of practical, or theory, practical, and case studies, right? So how are open pedagogy practices enacted in other contexts, and how we can apply that in our own context in the classroom. So this OER really has a lot of examples that we drew a lot from, and it's called Open Pedagogy Approaches. And what's good about this is that it highlights faculty and library student collaborations when it comes to open pedagogy. So we drew on a lot of examples from this as well. Yeah, so let me see what is in the chat. Okay, so I thought there's some questions in there. So yeah, so we also have a lot of activities that we got from Equity Unbound. Okay, and this is the URL for that. The next slide will show you, three of the lovely people that I've had a chance to, work with in the Open. So Maha, Mia, and Catherine Cronin, you've probably remembered her from the definition that Andy has presented to you earlier, because she works a lot with her research agenda is on open pedagogy. So they created this site for educators to give educators a chance to think of ways to engage their students more, especially as we are doing a lot of our teaching and learning online. So check out all the activities here. And one of the activities we tried out from the Equity Unbound site was the Wild Networking MAD-T. So this is so much fun to do. So this kind of is like an icebreaker for you to get to know each of the participants within your group. And yeah, so this is really a nice way for us to get to know each other better. So we had that MAD-T activity. Oh, and I forgot, I think Autumn is here. Autumn Keynes also, play the big role in Equity Unbound. Shout out to Autumn Keynes, who is in this room as well. Yeah, so Spiral Journal is also one of the activities that we did within the learning community. I hope, you found that fun, right? For those people who were doing that activity with us. And another of the activities we did was the annotate the syllabus. Yeah, this is interesting because in one of the meetings that we had, we asked our participants to share their syllabi, right, with each other, and like, excuse me, kind of comment, so we divided them into breakout rooms, and then each one looked at a syllabus of another faculty and then kind of did some annotation and feedback. I mean, it's really nice to be able to have that opportunity to see one syllabus, especially, since a lot of the participants belong to different disciplines, right? So that is also one of the things that that we did in one of our activities. The next one, please. Oh, and this one too is an activity that we did from the DS-106 assignment bank. So DS-106 has become sort of a legend already in the field of student-created OER, because this started, as you can see, from University of Mary Washington in 2010, started by digital storytelling students. Then it just morphed into this crowdsourced, student-created, remixable collection of learner-created assignments. So yeah, that one is interesting too. So yeah, so that is so what we are trying to show you here hopefully are like some of the practical things that we did within the learning community. So there are activities that we've done, there's discussions that we had both as a big group and in small breakout rooms, and there's really a lot of conversations. I'm gonna call on maybe Denise to kind of like talk to the folks here in this room about how the conversations were, and how you as a participant in this learning community have been impacted. We are so lucky that the participants of the LC are here too, so I am gonna take advantage of that and like highlight you as, talk about your experience. So Denise, you can unmute yourself. Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay. And I'll try to be succinct because Regina knows and Andy knows I can talk forever. We're teachers, right? Okay, so can you remind me of what you want me to focus on again?
Yeah, just talk briefly. I said briefly, right? About your experiences regarding, some of the activities that we have done as part of the learning community.
Well, I don't have any of my notes in front of me, but and I will let you draw to or speak to the specific activities. But I know a lot of, in the meetings that we've had, we have both individual reflective times where we can kind of gather our thoughts and then work collaboratively in breakout meetings. And then we come back and we share with both Regina and Andy and obviously everybody else. And again, I can't right off the top of my head remember exactly what each of those experiences were called. But I do know that through those experiences, not only did I have examples of each stage of the OER processes, but those included from my fellow LC participants and Regina and Andy as well, examples of how to equitably and equally include students in the processes of creating an O&R. And that is something that really motivated me in March of I have to think of what year was 2020. In a humanities class, I was teaching for the first time on hookup culture, which was an experience in and of itself, to have the students actually write a book on hookup culture from their own perspective. And it was really amazing to me because the 51 students in the class represented the diversity that really is representative of Michigan State University's campus. And so once that book was complete, I then worked with Regina to make it into an OER text, or I don't know what the right word is, an OER.
Yeah, it's an OER, yeah.
It's an OER, yeah.
Yes.
So those opportunities have been both professionally on an individual and then as a collective and collaborative experience, scaffolded for me anyways, to help me learn how each of these steps in creating an OER is integral to, of course, me as a professional, but also to my colleagues, my students especially, and the community at large in terms of DEI, and especially in terms of equitable and equal access, which is, for me anyways, the big kahuna, if you will, of OER.
Thank you, Denise. And actually, Denise is one of our exemplars because she's one of the first probably OER that we've published that incorporated our students in its creation. It's actually the students who created that OER, and she was the guiding force behind it. And so in the authorship of that OER, it's all of her IAH 231B students. And so, I remember there was one meeting where Denise talked about how that played out, how, she was able to draw upon her students to be creators of an OER that is going to be used for their course. So thank you for that, Denise. Andy, if you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so I think it's you. So basically, we just asked them, how are we doing? Are we awesome? Of course we are, right? Or are we less awesome? So Andy will talk about the feedback that we've had from our participants.
Yeah, thank you, Regina. So we've talked a little bit, kind of the underpinnings, the foundations for this. We've talked a little bit about the activities that we did, how we structured each month, how our learning community was built, but now kind of how did it go? As we are actively talking about and preparing for another year of our learning community, we're really kind of looking back and reflecting a little bit at what went well and what could be improved. In the last session of the learning community this past year, we asked our participants to reflect, which is in and of itself a valuable open pedagogical practice. And then we collaboratively came back together and discussed their experiences and kind of the steps forward. Had kind of an open forum for what went well, what didn't, etc. With their permissions, we're sharing some of that feedback here today. This first one, describing open educational practices, one of our participants stated, it's not just open resources for students to read for class, it is a broader concept and calls for teachers within a community to help one another out, to share ideas, class activities, lesson plans, as well as reading materials. It's the type of community that I hope becomes more accepted rather than holding on to our own work and thinking that it's only fair that other teachers need to do their own work for their classes. That last point of this was something that we talked about a decent bit and we came back to multiple times, as well as talking about that with like promotion and tenure and different things along that line for valuing the work that individuals are doing. Adding to this, another participant commented, there are many reasons why OERs help with making education accessible. At first, I was thinking that it was solely related to the cost of textbooks, and that is certainly an important issue. But we discussed many other ways that OERs can help people to have better access to education. I will just continue to advocate use of OERs, and am probably more likely than before to work on more OERs. Yes, exactly. Yay on that. Another participant noted, I appreciate my colleagues, such as in this group, and others around our now virtual campus, who allow me into their lives to ensure that sense of community and growth. Regina's OER opportunities are almost a culmination of each of these experiences for me, and subsequently led to better learning experiences, I hope, for my students. One of the elements I found most intriguing in these last three pieces of feedback have been their emphasis outside of just their own classroom and towards many of the broader departmental, university, and community possibilities for open education and open educational practices. Lastly, another participant highlighted the value of such a learning community for us as educators. Having the ability to get together with a group of like-minded faculty can be of such value for sharing ideas, strategies, and challenges. And I know for myself as one of the facilitators, that was one of the things that I looked forward to most every month, were the experiences that each individual had had and everything that people were bringing to the table and sharing and discussing with each other. So what are our takeaways with it? At this, I'll pass it over to Regina again.
Yeah, and really, thank you for highlighting those voices of our faculty participants. Really, it's everything that I had hoped we can achieve during the whole year that we are, we have been convening. So that's like 9 meetings. Right? So we started in September and we ended September 2020 and we ended in April 2021. So we really had a chance to get to know each other, get to know our teaching philosophy, our challenges, our opportunities, and really what we hope we have achieved in this community is that this is a community where we reach out, to each other for help, for support, for mentorship, for anything that would make their teaching more open and student-centered. So you mentioned about takeaways. Our last slide is actually takeaways. And the emphasis on reflexivity. And I cannot emphasize this enough. We really do a lot of introspection. We do a lot of reflective thinking about our practices, about our the ways we do our work in the open. And so one of the takeaways we had was that our faculty who are using and creating OER really appreciate this community. And the collaborative learning that happens around open educational practices. Being comfortable with ambiguity, right? We don't always have the answers, and sometimes the answers are not black and white. And so we really need to be comfortable with that ambiguity, or what I called, I wish I invented this word, the not yetness, right, of our open pedagogy practices. Because as you know, right, we come into the open in our own time, right? Sometimes it's not now or not yet, but we will get there. And so the importance of baby steps too, right? You probably are not 100% comfortable with doing, open practice like 100%, but maybe you can do some baby steps, and that is okay too. And ultimately we are a learning community, and we learn together. So learning together and with each other. So I think that sums up the learning community that we've had for the past year. And so yeah, this is our contact emails. If you follow me on Twitter or Andy on Twitter, this is our handle. Yeah, we can stop sharing and we can take a look at, questions, and let's talk. And I'd like to highlight really experiences from the faculty who are part of this learning community. And so I gave you fair warning, right? So I will call on you, Rajiv. Maybe you can share some of your takeaways in your 9-month participating in this learning community. How has it changed you as an OER author and creator? And now that you have learned all of this stuff, and then we'll go with Bonnie, because Bonnie has a different perspective, right? Being new at MSU and new to, yeah, I'll let you speak, but first we'll do Rajiv. Not too long, Rajiv, right? I will give you 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. So that was, thanks, Regina. That was a wonderful opportunity to participate. When I started, I had no idea what's this going to be all about, but after a couple of meetings with Regina and Andy and all my colleagues who are teachers, but not necessarily language teachers, were amazing, because as a language teacher, we always look for some new ways of teaching and pedagogical approaches. And as a fixed term faculty, it's really isolating in many ways, because we are just all happen to be in our own cocoon and we don't look out. But this kind of set up a platform where we all shared. What was really interesting, and maybe like what I really enjoyed, is that it happened during the time of pandemic, and we have no sense of community, and we all were feeling a little isolated. So the activities that Regina and this whole team, Andy and everybody did, is like we would engage in a breakout room and we'll do some kind of activities that gave me so much ideas how to do that interactive and community building sort of activities with my own students. So I learned it in this platform and used it in my classroom too. So that was a very good learning experience. And I'll set up now, Regina. My 2 minutes is over.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Rajiv. And you can come back later. But yeah, Bonnie.
Yeah, so my name is Bonnie Russell. I'm actually the project manager for Humanities Commons and MSU Commons. And I started at Michigan State during the pandemic. So I am also fixed term. I'm a 30% faculty, 70% academic specialist. And so I was looking for community. I had just finished a master's in library and information science in April of 2020 before I joined MSU, and had done my capstone project on OER. So I was very, very interested in open educational resources and how they were being used. I'm the project manager for a platform that has an open access repository, and we encourage people to publish. And so when I saw the learning community come up, and I had heard really great things about you, Regina, and everybody kept saying, you need to meet Regina because you're interested in OER. And so I came to it from a different perspective, thinking about how people use OER and how I can encourage people through the Commons and through my other work in terms of taking part in that, and to think about, you know, the creation of resources. And one of the things I had studied in my master's was the idea that it also gives people voice that maybe are shut out of the traditional publishing process. So people with different points of views, or people without the sort of institutional sort of clout that sometimes follows textbook creators. And it was a wonderful experience because I got to meet faculty, I got to meet and to kind of connect with people who were passionate about the same things that I was, and really got to think a lot about ways in which I can use my position with the Commons to encourage people to really get involved in this.
Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie. Yeah, and do you have any questions for us or for our participants? And Dave, you are also in there in the learning community, so thank you. And Dave is our learning experience designer, right, at MSU?
That's right. I am a learning experience designer, and I've always been a really big fan of our learning communities program at MSU. In fact, I'm probably too much of a big fan because I end up joining way too many, and I don't commit enough to the individual learning communities that I'm a part of, including this one. I got to go to a couple sessions, and that's about it. But it was it's just fantastic to also see what you guys have done over the past year, and I absolutely love what Regina is doing in the world of OER for MSU and Andy, and I'm constantly pointing people to you when I can, because you're just a force for networking and for goodness in the world around these things. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Dave. Yeah, we have a few more minutes before we have to go. So do some of you have learning communities in your institution, or kind of like that, no, informal or formal group? Amanda, I don't know if Ohio State has that. I am just calling on people. I don't know.
Just calling people out left and right.
No, right? Yeah.
What kind of group? Formal group?
Yeah. Like, do you have like an open ped group or open educational practices group at Ohio?
So that's what I'm trying to spin up in my position, is an open educational practices or an open pedagogy group. And the pandemic slowed me down, surprisingly to no one. And my goal, because I need to do it for two different audiences. I need to make one for sort of like library staff and instructional design folks who need to understand sort of like the concepts that their instructors are working for. And then also for faculty and instructors across the university to do that, which is why I'm here, so I can take all these beautiful ideas and be like, Regina did it, I could do it too.
Yeah, and actually we are going to continue this learning community in this coming school year. So we got another slot for the AAN Academic Advancement Network Learning Community group. So we are able to continue this, Andy and I, for the next academic year, which is really good. So then, and I think one of the feedback that we got from the faculty is that we need to have a learning community and an open pedagogy learning community 2.0 for the first cohort of graduates. Yeah. So hopefully we'll be able to convene in person. And I forgot, there was the thing that we were able to get through all our participants, we were able to purchase books. So for them, and we had the Pedagogy of the Oppressed and also the Teaching Manifesto. Oh, Radical Teaching. So yeah, that is what we use the $500 budget that we had for this year. Yeah. So hopefully this presentation has sparked some ideas for you to take into your institution if you're thinking of convening a learning community yourself. We will be making our, I think we've uploaded our presentation already in Sched. And if you have any further questions about, the learning community, please just contact Andy or myself. Yeah, thank you so much. And please, there is a wrap up at like 3 p.m., right? There's a wrap up and a raffle drawing. So it's not a free trip to the Bahamas, but it's something. So I hope to see you there. Thank you, everyone.